starting.
Ditto. Ditto.
And thank you to everyone who showed up on time.
We're going live.
All right. So, folks, good evening. Happy Monday. Hope everyone enjoyed the spring day and everybody is still ready for the potential winter day coming on Wednesday. And so it is 6:32, and this is the first meeting of Brooklyn Community Board 14's Youth Services, Education, and Libraries Committee. So thank you all. And the main purpose of this meeting, I co-chair number 1 and Nikki co-chair number 2. This is about planning the upcoming Youth Services Conference. And so historically it's been in March. It is definitely not happening in March. And the other thing to note too is that the NYC Department of Youth and Community Development did release their 2022 Summer Youth Employment Program application. And they said that the deadline is April 22nd. And so the purpose of this conversation is for us to plan, when the Youth Services Conference would take place and all the other things that are associated with it.
And I just want to take a moment and thank you to Joel from Rita Joseph's office for joining the committee meeting. And please feel free to contribute to the conversation. We're very grateful to have you here. And as Carl just mentioned, SYEP applications are available. I think that had always been like such a big part of choosing the date for the event, but I actually feel that it's okay for it to not be I think it would be great if we could somehow do something where there's still time for kids to apply. But I also think at this point we have so many wonderful organizations that participate that doesn't need to be sort of the do or die central puzzle piece of the whole thing. I don't know, Sean, if you have thought. You do. There you go.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. I think that over the years, there was a concern in the beginning that not enough youth from our community were applying for it. And so it was a push to increase those numbers. But of course, we have as it's a lottery, really had no control over whether or not they would get in. And then for many years, the percentage of students chosen was so small that it kind of, I think that organically this event has shifted so focused not away from that, but to include, sort of broadened it to include other services and programs. And so this year, part of the thinking to delay it was also COVID concerns. And we really, really, really would like to do this as an in-person event this year. We did it remotely last year and it had some value, but it wasn't everything, it had been in the past. So if we were to wait until early mid-May so that the weather is slightly more dependable, and we've talked to the people at the Lafrac Center in Prospect Park. That would be a beautiful venue. It is also, it's covered, so we would be able to have an outdoor event without huge fear of rain and bad weather. And so Anya can maybe speak more to this, but she's engaged them in a preliminary conversation. We hope to have a site visit planned if this is indeed something the committee thinks is a good thing to pursue. And so that's kind of where we're at with the thinking. It allows us to kind of do our traditional event the way we've always done it. We wouldn't have to, we would be everybody in the pool. We wouldn't have to limit the number of organizations and such who could participate. And I think it's kind of a cool way for the Prospect Park Alliance to show off one of their gems in the asset that is Prospect Park. So that was a lot, but just to get that started.
No, that's super cool. And I thought just in terms of sort of framing our conversation tonight, and I do want to just acknowledge this is the first time this committee is meeting with the new composition of the board, right? So now it's not just youth services. There are additional like areas of focus, which means additional city agencies. And I know that Sean and Anya will help us liaise with them and bring in speakers from those agencies. I think the idea of focusing the meeting so much on this one subject tonight was just there's always a lot to talk about. It's our second meeting of the year, so let's get this out of the way, and then we can start adding in those different things. And just a quick note before Glenn and Joanne go, just want to say, I thought the topics that we could try and cover tonight would be just ideas around date. Now that we know the SYEP location, Sean, you already shared a really cool location. It's got a roof, it's got bathrooms, it has a sound system, it's got it all. And then, just like content, things that can work and can't work in an outside setting. And then COVID considerations, if any. If it's outdoors, there aren't really any. But I'll put those in the chat as like things if we could talk about those tonight. And if we have tons of extra time, I want to talk a little bit just about communications, because I think this is also like a transitional meeting, right? And there were a few different modes of communicating about the event that we used in the past that I want to just talk through how we would do that this year without Jonathan here. So I'll put everything I just said in the chat, but then Glenn and then Joanne.
Thank you. Just two questions. Did you say when the close of applying for the Summer Youth Employment Program was? We know what that date is? Just out of curiosity. But also, I love the idea of the Left Rack Center, but what I'm wondering about is what is public transportation? How do people get there? I know you can drive into the parking lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
By bicycle. But what other, for the kids and various people to get there? Is this going to be a problem?
I think I can answer that. So, we have the Parkside Q station, so students can get off there. We also have the Flatbush Avenue bus. They can get off there. They can get off the Clarkson Avenue bus, which I think is the B12. They can get off there. So there is plenty of nodes for students to get to the Frack Center, and it's only not even a 5-minute walk from the Parkside entrance.
Thank you.
So if Glenn doesn't have any more questions, I'll just say that I am fully in support of doing the LaFrac Center. I think it's a really great departure from what we usually do. I think it's a good, welcome home. We're doing it back in person. I think the only thing we have to be very cognizant about is marketing it. And I think if it's at the LaFrac Center, we can really exploit that. And also I really don't want to see an empty ring. So we're going to have to work very hard as a community board to get everyone, all the students there for this, event, but fully in support of it, whatever the committee decides.
Joanne, question for you. When you said marketing and exploiting the LaFrac Center, could you elaborate on that a little bit more? What do you think about?
Well, there has been a push every year to try to get, third-party sponsorship. Of course, we can call the Alliance a sponsor, and we will solidify that. But I don't know, maybe we can just go bigger and beyond. But I just want to make sure that because it's not a relatively bigger space versus the YMCA, but it is more powerful, if that makes sense. And we have 2 interior rooms that we can do our mentor, the mock interviews and other workshops. It's just really a good situation for us for this year as our comeback. So I just want to make sure that we are fully getting to the community and making sure that they attend, because I wouldn't want to see this big beautiful space not packed.
Just a quick interjection, because I think, it's always scary to have a space that big, right? Because you're like, oh no, what if it's not full? But I think 2 things. We would probably, unless it's pouring rain that day, hopefully get some good traction just from people wandering around the park, which would be really cool, accidental stop-ins. But then Anya and Sean, as you continue to talk to the Left Rack Center, could you ask them if they would be willing to use their probably extremely powerful communication channels to promote the event as part of hosting it? Because then that would give us exposure to lists of people that would have never heard of this before.
I mean, yeah, the Alliance was all over it. They were very excited that we were even making an inquiry. So I don't think that that's going to be a hard sell.
And then I'm not sure who put their hand up first, whether it was Anne or Florencia. So, Florencia, you're first on my screen. So you go first and then Anne. And hopefully you won't be mad at me, either of you.
Good night, everyone. I am in support of the LaFrac Center. I've been to at least 3 events over there, and they turned out pretty well. The space, the everything. They have all the accommodations there that would be well suited, you know, for the students for getting around, the layout and all of that, bathrooms and all of that. So I am totally in full support. And, you know, all of us that have social media, Dwayne has like thousands of people. There are ways of getting out. Our churches and other organizations will definitely push this. And as Joanne said, we have the Prospect Park, Parkside, you know, we have trains and buses, ways of getting there. So it's easy to get to if, you know, one does not drive. If their parents aren't bringing them, it's quite easy for them to get to. So yes, I'm totally on board. And I will do all I can on my social media platform as well to promote it, and to, you know, various organizations. We'll work it together. Tamba also can be an outlet in which to, you know, share the flyers. Thank you.
Anne?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really an exciting venue as well. I'm just curious, how do they have tables for such an event? Would that be excellent? So we can just set up and break down, but not worry about getting them in there. So that's great. And by any chance, are they waiving any fee or?
They said that they would work with us on fee. It will be, you know, it'll be more than more than Brooklyn College and Flatbush, but we have extra funding. I shouldn't call it extra funding. We have funding from the council member, from actually Matthew Eugene, and so that sort of was meant to be used for stuff like this. It's outside of our regular budget. Usually we have to dip into our regular budget. I think we might be able to do this event with dipping into our regular budget very little, if at all. So Anya had the conversation with them, and so we'll get a better idea of exactly how much once we do a walkthrough with them, and we identify how much space. But they know what it's about. They know that we're, you know, a measly little city agency, and that this is a good cause. So I think they're going to be as flexible as they can be, but it will be more than usual. And I don't know that we'll be able to come if it's wonderful. I don't know if we'll be able to come back to it every year, but I think this year, with the idea that everybody's been so cooped up for so long, I think organizations are hungry to be face to face with young people. Young people have been on a screen for 2 years now. You know, organizations and agencies I think we'll have a lot of people out there, and I'm not worried about it being well attended and well participated in. And I just want to say, because I'm so excited about this part, Anya, correct me if I'm wrong, but they actually provide the manual labor. They will set up the tables and do that setup, right?
That's awesome.
So, yeah, that won't be a gym day for me.
I have another question. I'm trying to remember what it was. It'll come back to me. Thank you.
Okay, so then thank you for those questions. And so I have a question about location too. And so the FRAC is the primary place that we're looking at, and conversations have started. My question is, you know, if I just put on, unfortunately, my Debbie Downer hat, if those conversations don't work, then what is our backup? Would we be going to the YMCA? Would we be going to, you know, Brooklyn College? And, you know, would that conversation need to happen in parallel, or like, what are we thinking?
I think we'll have a clear sense from LaFrac soon enough that if we need a backup plan, the why is in my head, and East Midwood Jewish Center, which I don't think that that's as attractive, but I know it's there for us anytime we need it. Wayne Rosenfeld says that to me all the time. There's also Brooklyn College, but I feel a little bit like that might be a high hurdle. They're difficult in many ways anyway, and you know, it might be more so now. But we do have options. The other thing I thought of, but I think this would be so labor intensive, but there's, and we would have to scale it down, is the King's Theater outside in that little King's Theater gravel pit.
Okay.
So there are backup options, and I don't think that it would take that much to put them into place.
Got you. Okay.
Just from my like normal job, I'm trying to get event space at colleges right now, and they are like their own little universe. It's extremely complicated to do any private events at a higher education campus.
Yeah, I mean, they, especially with underage, like they had a lot of rules about wanting permission slips and that sort of thing, and we had ways of finessing that, but I just felt uncomfortable sometimes, and I feel like that's a little bit of a barrier to entry. You know, the more you require paperwork from a teenager, the less likely it's, you know, we're gonna do everything we want to do.
And I even meant just in terms of COVID stuff. Like I've been trying to get space at NYU in Columbia, and they're like, we don't care what the city says. Everybody who comes in here has to meet like XYZ. They have their own universe of rules. Maybe that will change, but I don't think change super soon. I saw a comment from Anne in the chat just about the timing relative to the not-for-profit roundtable. And then Anne, I see you also have your hand raised.
Nonprofit roundtable
That was my
invitations are.
question.
Yeah,
earlier.
nonprofit roundtable invitations are going out probably tomorrow. That event is on March 30th, so that's this month. We just got word today that Comptroller Brad Lander will be there, promoting, you know, a project that he's spearheading to make to help organizations get their city money faster. So I don't, you know, there's the planning for that isn't a super heavy lift, and won't get in the way of moving as quickly as we need to move for the youth conference. And I'm speaking as if I'm assuming a little bit that everybody is comfortable with the early May, you know, for second week of May dates. We can talk more about that, of course. And then Glenn, I did answer you in the chat that the SYEP deadline right now is said to be April 22nd. They do tend to expand upon that, but again, I think we're going to promote that independently of the youth conference. And every time we send out the youth conference, we can add a reminder that you can still apply for SYEP, but I don't think that they necessarily have to be super married.
Thank you for that, Sean. And so that's a perfect tie-in too in terms of date. And so, yes, like you had mentioned before, a potential idea was maybe the first or second week of May. What I can let people know is I myself, I like that idea. I'd say the only caveat is that I will be out May 5th, Thursday through Sunday, May 8th. I wouldn't be around that time. And so I would feel bad if it took place during any of those days and I weren't there, just because I love you guys and I don't think that's a good look. But
Well, and to make it more complicated, as the co-chair, I have to be in, unless, and I don't say this lightly, unless the conflict in Europe seriously expands, I have to be in Europe from like May 3rd through May 15th about. But I also like this event is not, I would just feel extremely bad not being there as co-chair, but if those are the only workable dates, like I will send, I don't know, someone in my stead to move tables and help with the actual work. But for me to be there, it would have to be I'll look at a calendar, but before that date.
Or after.
Or after.
Yeah, or after, yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason why we're not considering the end of April? Sean?
It just feels it feels soon. I'm doing the April calendar for all of the committee meetings. And I mean, we can certainly talk about it. Passover begins the 15th and goes all the way through to the 23rd. So it would, the end of April would be, I don't know, the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th.
Which would put us past the SYEP deadline if that's what you're thinking, Glenn, just to put that in.
Well, it seems to me that, you know, if we can do that last week in April, that makes it easy for both of our co-chairs who are working hard on this event and I'm sure would like to be there.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's no doubt that we're going to plan this around the co-chair schedules.
Sounds terrible. But I would say, like, if we're gonna miss the SYEP deadline, then like if that last week of April, the April 25th, if you already missed the SYEP deadline, then I don't think there's a big deal with doing it later on in May, right? That deadline therefore becomes inconsequential. It doesn't put as much pressure on Sean and Anya in terms of turnaround time. So I
They did mention that occasionally the deadline gets pushed back a few days.
Yeah,
So,
it does.
and
Okay,
so
so we
if
can
we're-
ask LaFrac Center if, we can look at we can keep April, say 26th, 27th. I think we avoid Mondays, right, Anya?
Generally, yeah, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I also just want to put out one more thought I just had that if we were a month past the deadline, looking at that later May date, some of the students might know if they got those lottery positions or not by then. So they might know if they're actually looking for something to do for the summer, or if they're, if they got that SYEP job. I'm just thinking that might be something to consider.
Well, look, whenever it's possible for us to include the applications for the SYP, that becomes a really big draw for a lot of these kids because we don't.
I mean, that we don't have data to back that up, though. I mean, we've sort of promoted that internally, but I don't know when we've done the questionnaires that that's really shown up as a big draw according to the students themselves.
Okay.
Okay, great. So then it sounds like we have two sort of range options. And thank you, Sean and Anya, I think we'll all be excited to hear how your conversations go with is it LEFRAC or LEFRAC? I want to put the emphasis on the right syllable.
Guys.
I see what you did there. I see what you did there.
Cool. No, I just got told by someone I've known for like 10 years that I was pronouncing her name incorrectly for the entire time. So I'm hypersensitive to this at the moment. And her name is like a 4-letter name, so it really shouldn't have been hard. Great. Okay, so in terms of location, sounds like LEFRAC Center is top, and then we have a few backups, but we don't need to investigate those unless unless the LEFRAC Center falls through. We have 2 date ranges. Thank you so much to everyone for being understanding about Carl and my schedules. And then there were great questions, which I'm sure Anya and Sean will take to those conversations. And then the other things were around content and then COVID considerations, if any. So Carl, I don't know if you have any thoughts on content to get us started, or Sean and Anya or any members of the committee. It was really cool to hear Joanne mention that the practice interview workshops would still be possible at the LEFRAC Center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just following up on that, basically, it's just, I'm just curious that with the push to have this in person, I'm wondering, yes, right, some of the things that we had before, like the interviews and maybe some of the resume workshops or some of the other workshops, would we go back to some of those things from maybe like, 2018, 2019, or would there be some new stuff? I am interested in that, yes.
I mean, I think that the mock interviews were really popular and it drew other volunteers in. I remember the last one we had where Farrah Lewis said she'd do an interview and then she was enjoying herself so much she did about an hour's worth, right? So we'll have, and that can be indoor. I mean, that's sort of another nice thing about the location is that the tabling can be outside, and then there's at least 2 rooms inside. One is one could be for mock interviews, or they could both be for mock interviews, or we could go back to the idea of workshops, which, workshops have ebbed and flowed in terms of success, but, we have the option to do that if organizations want to do, even if we did 1 or 2 workshops, we could do that.
And can I just quickly jump in to let you guys know there are 3 indoor spaces, just to let you know what is available. There's 3 indoor rooms that are modular. So those 3 spaces could be turned into 1 or could be turned into 2 or it could be 3. And then there's also an additional conference room space, which is a little less outfitted with AV equipment, but is also available.
Okay, so thank you for that, Anya and Sean. And so does this mean that very high level in terms of content, what we're thinking for this year's conference, we'll have the mock interviews, there would be 1 to 2, workshops, and then Joanne, I see your hand up.
So my suggestion is to, let's get a site visit going. Let's see the size of the rooms. And then we know the popularity of the programming. And then you guys can decide how to allocate the space. If that means that workshops are, out because you want to focus on mock interviews because that's been the most popular and productive, that's up to you. So I know that once the committee makes a decision that they're into renting the venue, then we'll do a site visit. Thank you.
And then were there, oh, sorry.
Yeah, Nikki, go ahead.
No, thank you, Joanne. And were there any, like from the virtual version of the conference that we did, was there anything that people really liked or, perhaps that we got good feedback on that we should try and bring back to this year?
I kind of would have to go back and review. Nothing stands out in my memory, but my memory is generally feeble. But let's, maybe all of us, depending on time, between now and whenever, maybe just sort of pick out a random spot on last year's youth conference and look in on it and see. And Nikki, you hosted a room, right?
Yeah, and that's why I'm
So
like,
can you answer that your own question, or are you
I literally repeated the same session 3 times, and I was kind of trying to remember what I did during the 3 times of it. But I think what stood out for me was like the people who were on the panel, right? There's like, but the opportunity for the attendees to get and meet and ask questions of people that they might want to grow up to be like. But I think that's part of what happens in the interview, the mock interview and the resume help workshops intrinsically. That's part of it, right?
Yeah.
You're meeting like successful people who give you advice. So I think in many ways, and I love the interview and the resume workshops. I never get bored of doing those. I think they're extremely valuable for the people who participate. And as you mentioned, like it's such a great way to engage not just the rest of the board, but maybe Rita Joseph wants to do mock interviews, right? Like a great way to engage the talented people in the community as well. I saw Glenn and then Anne.
I just would like to just reinforce what you're saying. I think that the mock interviews and the resume writing and any other type of workshops that somebody might be willing to run for us are extremely valuable for young people. So I'm very much in favor of that type of activity. Thank you.
Anne?
Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, so last year, I had a problem getting connected into a room. And so I used the first about half of the conference itself, bouncing between rooms. And what I observed from my feeble memory is that many of the students didn't actually participate. They kind of sat there. And so it allowed the panelists to talk up repeatedly their own mission statements. And I just wonder how much, I'm really excited that we can do this in person, because I think that person to person, the students may be less worried about judgment or whatever their inadequacy fears are, and that they may feel more comfortable engaging as somebody's sitting there smiling and nodding to them, right? Because they were quietly in the room. But I don't know. I like the idea of doing it in person, but I'm curious if it's if there's a way that we could also allow or try to get the recorded session out, so that those who, for whatever conflict reason, couldn't attend would still be able to see what opportunities are available to them, whether they matched or didn't for the DYCD program. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Sean?
Kind of going back to last year's remote event, those were, Anne said panels, and they were more like panel discussions than they were, sort of interactive. And that is something that if we have hot topics like coding, or maybe our cure violence organizations would want to be on a panel, so it could be more of a talk with students. It's just an idea to maybe keep in our pocket. But what it made me think that I kind of got excited about was the idea of all of those videos that the organizations provided last year. Some of those, if not all of them, were pretty slick and nicely done. And so maybe there's a place where we can just run those, check in with the organizations, make sure they're still on point, and just have a spot where they're running on a loop, just to give them more play and to draw students into other, just deeper information about them. And maybe we could ask organizations if they wanted to add to that, if they wanted something on, if they wanted to record something and give that as an example for them. I kind of am thinking of things that wouldn't take too much extra administrative work on our part. That might not be one of them, but I just wanted to get that out there. I think as far as tabling goes, I don't want to totally reinvent the wheel, because we've had such success with the model that we've done live, but I think tabling is going to be big. I think we're going to have 80 organizations, organizations, agencies, businesses, all of that. I think 80 is not a far off number, or far out number. Anya, what do you agree?
Yeah, but I do think if we go with LaFrec, if we're looking at having an LaFrec, my New York corrected me.
Make a choice, Anya, you're fine.
I am West Coast. I admit it. I've been here 20 years. It's not long enough. Anyway, there is somewhat of a limit. So they did tell me 50 to 60 tables is absolutely reasonable for that covered outdoor space. If we moved into the uncovered outdoor space, of course, it's more room, but it does open us up to weather problems. So we might actually want to curate that list a little bit and not go with 80, but rather try to keep it at 50, so that we could still maintain, even if we're outdoors, we might still want some social distancing a bit between tables, not as packed in there. So yes, I agree that it would be easy to pull in quite a few people, but it might be good to set a limit and hold it at that.
And it can be like super exclusive. Like, oh my God, so sorry guys, it's so popular. Maybe next
that
year.
Roof space, that roof space upstairs. I didn't mention that, but that could be VIP section.
Yes. And I just while you're doing your site, when you do your site visit, the other thing is I know they do have a number of digital display. I'm just, Sean, to your point about videos, because like before this meeting, I was prepping by looking at anything anywhere where CB14 Youth Conference has a digital presence, and like for instance there's actually two websites on. I think you linked to CB14 Youth Conference NYC. And then for the virtual one, there was CB14 Youth Conference.com, and all the videos are still there and all the recordings from last year. And, you know, I don't know, again, venues like this generally charge quite a lot to use their existing digital displays, but if they would be willing to let us run that content on the digital displays, that would be amazing. And do us a favor. Cool. So it sounds like the room, if I read the room correctly, sounds like we all do like resume and interview workshops, but I know Carl has an additional cool idea. Carl?
Yeah, so this one, this is like breaking news. It just popped in my head as I was hearing this conversation. And so, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, the past 2 years have taken a toll on everybody, you know, in all manners, right? Like financially, emotionally, mentally. And so I was just wondering, you know, as we see the organizations that come in, when you were talking about the panel, I'm wondering, you know, what if we had some sort of panel with local organizations discussing adolescent mental health? Right? Like, it's just an idea. And, you know, I completely agree with Joanne's comment from earlier about, you know, if LaFrac is the place for us, then we do a site visit and we'll have a better sense of what things can work. But as I'm hearing people talk, something, you know, a potential panel idea that popped in my head, if we end up deciding like that's something we want to add to this youth conference, that was an idea that popped in my head.
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty easy to identify organizations that would want to participate in that.
Okay, thank
It'd
you.
be really cool to have like representatives of those organizations, but maybe we could also pick, like, for instance, one or two of the members of our youth leadership committee to actually sit on the panel and help, you know, like be a part of the conversation. I always think conversations about young people are cooler if there's actually a young person, and that might be like a really nice opportunity for, I know I met four members of the committee, and, you know, if we could find one or two of them to actually sit on it, that would be really cool. So in terms of, okay, so we talked about date, we talked about location, we talked about content. The fourth thing that I had thrown out there was just COVID considerations. If we're outdoors, that's, again, as someone whose wedding was poured on and not properly set up for that, I have like PTSD around having roofs whenever I'm outside. Like, my 80-year-old relatives got just drenched at my wedding. So I love the roof part of this, but if there was some sort of COVID thing that sprung up again, you know, my first question is, first of all, assuming that nothing springs up again and we don't have Omicron part 2, I guess we just follow city regulations on things like this to the letter. If we do have sort of an Omicron part 2, I would love to know the group's feeling about a situation that would force us to go back to having a virtual event, and if we were willing to do that, or if it was just like, no, if it can't happen in person, we just cancel it. Joanne?
We saw you, Joanne, and then we can you hear us? We saw you, then we lost you.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I hit the wrong button. So if there is another BA2 wave, which is the other variant of Omicron, I would suggest not canceling it because there's a lot at stake, but I think we can ask our participants to be diligent and wear masks. I think, and it's outdoors, it's masks. I think the level of transmission would be low in that situation. If we are relegated to be indoors, then we would have to cancel. That's my feeling. I'm thinking that in May, we might be okay. We can't really impose mandates on beyond what the city, because they have, you know, obviously done what they've done. And whoever wants to wear a mask can. We can offer masks at a welcome table if people feel like they want to wear them. I think outside mask wearing, if things aren't crazy, like 53,000 cases a day, then we're okay. I don't know what to do at that point. We're just going to have to go with the flow. I'm sorry to say. So that's my opinion.
Sean?
I hate to say this, but I feel really reluctant toward the idea of having a remote event backup plan. I feel like the pivot, it would be a lot of work, and just given the sort of lack of adolescent participation in last year's, the idea that we had time to get that in place and had high hopes for it and still didn't get a lot of interaction, and this year it would be a quick thing. I just think, I don't know that I'm keen on a remote backup plan. We could talk about, I don't know, sending out the old video, all of the videos or something like that, or putting together a website that we distribute, but something that's interactive and like, at a particular time on screen does not appeal to me.
Glenn?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should just move ahead with this, try to lock down a date. The only aspect of it that we might have to pivot a little off of is, worst case, is the indoor workshops. If the weather's good enough, we might be able to do those outside, so they won't be covered. But that's the only aspect of it I think we have to be concerned at all about. Because the rest of it, most of us hopefully are vaccinated and boosted, and we can wear masks, and it's outside. So that minimized the problem to begin with. So I'm all for moving ahead on this. I said locking down a date and not worrying about a backup plan. Thank you.
Carl, what do you think? You go first.
I thought I saw Anya had her hand up first for a second.
And I just wanted to chime in just to say that we could always do a backup digital resource, kind of similar to what Sean was saying, but people were really good about submitting those videos last year. So we could definitely, with a couple weeks notice, if we knew we were going to have to cancel an event for some reason, we could put together a digital resource rather than a digital event. So just.
Thank you, Anya. No, I mean, what everyone's saying, that tracks, right? Just there's been, the youth conference isn't the only place where the engagement in terms of remote stuff hasn't been high, right? People have shown up, they've logged in, but in terms of actual participation and engagement, that's been low. And so what we're discussing as a group about this, like that tracks across multiple things.
Yeah, and I'm actually deeply relieved to hear you all say that you don't want to have a digital backup plan, because again, as usual, my real life tracks with my community board, my regular life tracks with my community board life. And there are situations where for a variety of reasons, you can't cancel, right? In this case, that's not the case. So I would agree with that first of all, I agree with the group. I have no concerns whatsoever about the current COVID situation and having an outdoor event. And even if the numbers were worse, then you just follow the science, do what you can to mitigate risk and go forward. But I think it sounds to me like we're all in agreement that having like a backup for a digital event is not necessary. If the situation would make it impossible to have an in-person event, then we would just cancel and share virtual resources with the young people that had registered, which is fine with me.
Sounds right. And given that you're relieved to hear that, I'm going to go ahead and cancel my feeling bad about having said it.
Cool, great. Cancel that. Yes.
I'm going to cancel my cancellation. I like that.
Can I put one more thing in? Because we talked about having fewer public meetings to plan this, and because we're following a tried and true template. I mean, it was part of the reason why this was the only subject on the agenda today, because I thought we would try to suss everything out. And we'll see if things come up and we feel like we have to call together another public planning meeting. I'll just be in contact, and Anya will certainly be in contact with the co-chairs. But Let's try to get this planned, sort of through, we can email and keep each other up to date, but let me know if you think that what you're thinking about in terms of having more public planning meetings.
So I'll speak, and then I'd love to hear what Nikki thinks too. I agree with that, right? I mean, CB14 was doing this before Nikki and I joined the board, right? And I know the Matrix is a bad quote, but there's a part where the guy's like, "This is the F time we've done this, and we've gotten extremely good at it." And so I feel like it's a parallel thing here, and so I completely agree with that. Where we're meeting to highlight some of the main things to consider and just see what next steps are. But yeah, I don't think we need another group reconvening unless, like COVID's cousin did show up, right? Like, I think that would be the only reason why. And, that's my thought. Nikki, I'd love to hear what you think.
So if we can resolve my very short list of communications concerns before this meeting ends, then I would say we don't need another meeting. The one thing I do want is I do want people on the board to be excited about the event, our fellow community board 14 members, and feel that there are really fulfilling volunteer opportunities for them. So that's the one thing I don't want them to be like, "Oh, you guys canceled all the opportunities for me to contribute to this," right? So I think here are the things that I am thinking of. I think the first is there's sort of three main roles and responsibilities outside of the amazing work that Sean and Anya do. One of them is just creating promotional materials, which at this point in time, I am capable of doing that, but I would love to, if there's someone else on the board, they don't have to be in this meeting right now, but someone else who would like to contribute with that and have fun doing something creative. So just creating promotional materials. And then there's the act of distributing them, right? People usually go around the neighborhood and give them out. And part of the creation is to translate them, which, like Shahid, you've always been really helpful with Urdu, for instance. The other piece in terms of community, I think all of this we can do over email, just sort of spelling out the pre-event needs. The other is just organization recruitment. So in the past, I know we put together email templates that members of the board, they don't have to be on this committee, could use to send to their personal contacts to invite them to have a table. I know, again, we don't have any problem recruiting enough organizations to take tables, right? It was just a really nice way to involve other board members and make them feel included and engage them in the event. And then the other thing was day of stuff. Is there someone on the board who loves photography and would like to volunteer the day of? And, just making board members feel that they're welcome to come. So those were the three main things that have to get done that we usually would talk about a lot at meetings. In this case, I really feel like we just need a few volunteers, and then everything else can be done over email. And then the only other thing I wanted to just flag was, we're transitioning. Jonathan did such an amazing job and gave so generously of his time and also his technical skill, right? So there are 2 websites for this event. And they have things like the registration form, which is just a Google form, right? I think then there are 3 social media pages or presences. There's Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Again, I would defer to everyone else. I don't know that we're going to have the resources this year without Jonathan to maintain all of those presences. And then there's also the technical aspect. I would need to figure out what's the login for that? Who's paying for it? Maybe Sean and Anya know all the answers, but I think we could simplify the online presence of the event without sacrificing publicity. I know that was a lot. Yeah.
Now, Anya,
Sorry.
do you want to speak to the tech and the website maintenance and the enrollment form online, all of that technical stuff?
Sure, if you want. Yeah, we have access. I mean, we have the control of all of that stuff.
Okay.
But in the past, the social media, we did not believe you and Twain and Geoffrey and Legant helped with the Facebook over the past couple of years. So that's one thing that would be great. Just I know people have added the event once the event page is made, to their social network. So that's always helpful. We can do the website. I have it on my list to update to just get the placeholder in this week, so it says at least May 2022. Yeah, I mean, everything else, we are prepared to handle what we need to handle in-house, but any volunteers are great and welcome, and direct them to me.
And Nikki, I think you can make, and we can review it, together if you'd like, is part of the chairs, the committee chair's report at Monday's meeting on the 14th. You might want to have a list, and maybe we could even have like an email to go out so that people can sign up for specific things. Day of, I am a photographer, or, stuff like that. So if we have very specific tasks that we're asking board members and members of the public to sign up for, promoting it at the board meeting, and then we'll have it, in our announcements on a regular basis too.
I do have a question about the. Oh wait, so go ahead, Anya. Was that you? Go ahead.
Yeah, that was
Don't
me. I
apologize.
just wanted to jump in there really quick on the end, just to say, as the conversation keeps going to, don't hesitate, anyone on this meeting, to just reach out if you have an idea. If we don't come up with an answer tonight, but if you do have an idea, please keep that conversation going.
I'd also just like to mention that I have in the past, and I am very happy to contribute some funds if it is needed.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, you've always been really
Thank you,
generous with that. This looks like we're flush this year, but I will keep you in mind should we fall short on anything.
Okay.
Same with me, please.
Yep. Thank you.
You both.
And then
And,
quickly, Carl, if I could just add, since it's sort of in the same thing that Anya was saying, just in terms of resources in the office, we have Patricia Olander too, who's tech savvy. And, if Anya needs some support from Patricia, I'll let the two of them work out the division of labor. But I think it's more resources than we had before in terms of that sort of technical savvy.
Gotcha. Thank you for that reminder, and that's great to hear as well too. That's excellent.
Just a quick follow-up question. So you guys have access to both of the websites that have that CB14 Youth Conference URL. Okay, cool. And then like stuff like creating. Oh, sorry, Anya.
Yeah, Nicole, I just wanted to say, so we have access to the CB14 Youth Conference.nyc. The other one I do have access for, but I believe a licensing fee was only paid for 1 year. So that will probably expire, but all of those videos and other resources are uploaded onto our YouTube channel on that playlist. So, so we won't be, yes, and we could relicense it if you felt like that was important to relicense the second one, but we'll probably go with that .nyc one.
Cool.
Then Nikki, hearing that, so I guess your question maybe / concern about, us not having the ability to access those links and then update them as need be for the conference, that's taken care of.
Yep, which is awesome.
Okay, got you. And then something that did pop in my head when you were mentioning potential day of like a photographer or something, would we need, like, if we were able to get a photographer to take photos of things, is that the kind of thing where we would need the students to sign in, like, not an NDA, but, the families to sign some sort of release just because it's youth, it may be like 14 to 21. Is that the kind of thing we'd need permission for in case that happened or not? Is that even the right question to ask in this situation?
It's a great question. I don't really know the answer. We haven't done it at previous. Go ahead, Nikki.
Oh, I do. Unfortunately, this will sound, wait, this is me. I was going to say that. I take photos of kids all the time in a completely legal way. The main way to address that is that in the registration form, right, you have consent, but then also in the space, you need to have prominently posted signage that says, by entering this space, you permit to be photographed. I remember I photographed, what's it called? Open streets, city streets, like where they open up all of an avenue of Manhattan to traffic. And I photographed it for a museum and I had to check that. So if you're in a public space like that and there's signage, it should be sufficient legally. If someone else knows differently, let me know. But in a few different instances, I've had to deal with this particular issue with minors, and that's been enough.
And I suspect Prospect Park Alliance, that the FRAC has, knows what the policy is and has that in place, so we can double check with them as well.
Okay, thank you.
So does anyone else have any like opinions about having future meetings or planning? Please don't be shy. Feel free to disagree with us and, you know, say there's other stuff we really need to talk through more.
I mean, I'll just say one more thing about that. The fact is that, you know, there's other meetings with emphasis on the other, like libraries and education aspect of this committee. We can also, there's always an other business function on the agenda, and we can raise any outstanding questions that you feel like you want group input on, under the auspices of that.
Cool. And then my other question for the group would be, you know, I listed what I can see as some volunteer roles, but I do really think it's wonderful that this event is like something just like the nonprofit roundtable, right? Like lots of different people on the board can find some way to get involved, even if it's just attending the event day of. If anybody has any like really cool sort of volunteer ideas, please share them now. Also, like over email, if you think about them afterwards, I'm happy to. Carl and I can definitely chat about that. But any ideas about other ways to engage other board members in fun or necessary or fun necessary tasks?
So I would maybe just poll our members to see what kind of sponsorship opportunities we can have. We talk about this every year. We never really get like big sponsors, but this is like a big venue. So maybe somebody works for somebody that, you know, can sponsor this and make it a little bit more attractive, or however it works. But I just, after all these years, I really think that it deserves some really nice sponsorship. And I'm just talking out loud. Thanks.
Okay. I think that's a great idea. I have a question for Sean and Anya about like forms of receiving sponsorship and anything that we would need to think. Like I know there's, you know, sponsored by, but legal considerations or stuff about sponsoring events run by the city.
Well, I mean, for one thing, again, we've got this funding from, you know, from New York City Council. And so this is not necessarily a year that we need that, although to the extent that, you know, it helps us create another relationship with a sponsor. And you never turn down offers, right? But the way it works is really, we don't have a mechanism for accepting any cash or gifts in kind. So it would have to be somebody who was going to pay the bill directly. And we've done that before, where Copo paid, you know, Copo paid Brooklyn College, or Copo paid the Flatbush Y. That's, I think, been our main sponsor. I can't remember, Anya, if another organization has paid the venue directly. I think one year we had a sponsor that paid Big Dog table and chair rentals. So, you know, that's how that works. It's a direct payment to the vendor.
So again, please educate me. So accepting, you know, 50 cases of, I don't know, Himalayan water is an in-kind donation that is not within our purview.
No, we can take it. They just can't write it off as anything. I mean, we can take gifts in kind. We've accepted chips and apples and water from the Flatbush Food Co-op.
Right. And we gave them a shout out, and they had a little thing on our website as, you know, so that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's all good. I thought you meant big stuff.
I'm small potatoes.
I used to be in development.
You are not small potatoes, Joanne. Stop.
Still have that hangover.
So we will have some restrictions if we decide to go with Lakeside, the Lefrak Center. We can call it Lakeside, so we're all saying it correctly. We will have some restrictions. They do have in-house catering. We may be able to get a partnership with, say, an outside sponsor that could then just sort of pay them for that catering, but they do not want us to be bringing in outside food. And I can have that conversation again. They're very flexible, but their general rule, they would prefer us to, we talked about some of the things we had in the past, if, you know, snacks and apples, things like that. If we wanted to have that, I don't know if we will. But that's something to put on the table. And I think another way to sort of encourage that participation and volunteerism would be to sort of have a challenge to the board, and then our outside, the organizations, we do this every year, this is not new, but the organizations that participate, if we could kind of, brand this, I don't know if you want to go with kind of the same look that we've had in the past or change it up, but then there could be a little, a little tag or a little social media button thing that people could, put out there. And really, I think that's the best way, especially if we're worried about, I don't know how limited the number of people will be. So I don't know if we want 1,000 kids to show up. I don't know. I'm not sure. We have to think about that. But I think the best way for people to participate in an easy way would be to just help support the event. So if we could create some of those, we don't have that material available right now. Anyone that would want to volunteer to help to create that would be awesome.
Cool. I mean, when I think of sponsorship, and the reason I went to the legalities is because I would love to see some sort of prize be given out. I don't know how. I don't know what it would be for. I don't know how anybody would apply for it. But like, imagine if the Price Waterhouse Coopers, if you guys are watching the YouTube stream of the CB14 Youth Services Committee meeting, I'm talking to you. But if there was a company that was like, and we'd like to give out $1,000 cash prize, for a young person to do XYZ, or like a prize where the person gets to do some sort of coursework, or I don't know, but something like that where it was sponsoring a benefit to one of the young attendees, which also might drive attendance. Sean?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Or possibly scholarship opportunities, winning, a contribution toward books for school or something like that. Yeah, let's think creatively about that. I think, I know what I was really going to say though, is that because we are on the doorstep of Community Board 9, and they've been very interested in our youth conference before, I think it seems politic that I should call over there and just let them know that we're planning this in their backyard, to the extent that they might want to, participate and be a part of it. I could let you know what they're interested in doing it. I certainly don't want to totally partner and co-plan and get co-opted, but it feels right to give Dante Arnwine a call and let him know that this is where we're thinking of doing this. And maybe I'll just back up a little bit and make sure it does move forward at LaFrac. But I want to put that out there before I have the conversation to see if the committee has anything to say about that. Okay.
Have we thought about the hours, the conference?
Still thinking 4 to 7. I wasn't thinking of any change in that because we've never come across a better.
Okay.
I mean, we talk about it every year and I'm always open to conversation. Did you feel like it should be changed, Glenn?
No, it was fine. It just hadn't been mentioned and it popped into my head.
Word.
The sun will set at 7:46 on, the earliest date we discussed, which would be April 25th. The sun would set at 7:46. So at least, like, I think about, like, I was born in the 80s and I don't like walking through parks at night. I don't care how safe this city ever gets. So that just comes to mind.
But I'm glad you said it out loud because I really hadn't thought of that at all. And I'm putting it on my list to make sure that the PEP in parks is aware of the event. And it's probably something the Alliance has some mechanism for to do automatically, but let me make sure that it's on our minds.
And
Yep.
I would say, like, honestly, I wouldn't be averse to shifting the hours of the event back slightly earlier. Like, I know that
What,
we
you're
always
thinking
like to
3 to
have that.
Well, you're thinking like 3 to 6 or 3:30 to 6:30 or something like that?
No, I would just take the whole thing and move it back 1 hour. So like if we'd usually do 3 to 7, do 2 to 6. I know that we like to get parents coming off of work, but I don't know, just to give a little bit more time of getting out of the park during daylight.
So we usually do 4 to 7. Are you, if you wanted to do 3 to 6, I'm not opposed. I think it was a question of, I mean, I think it's fine, but there was a question of when students get out of school and whether it gave them enough time to get to the event, but they don't have to be there at the start. They can be there 4 still.
Mhm.
And it's not 1987. I know we're having issues with public safety, but I think I need to remind myself it's not, it should be fine. But still a good idea to talk to them about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think Anya and I spoke earlier today, and I know, you correct me if I'm wrong, Anya, but it's her intention, she's supposed to follow up on the conversation with the LeFrak people early this week, tomorrow or next day. And when we get a time set up for a site visit, we'll let co-chairs know in case you can join us for that and take it from there. If we did it early morning or evening, would either of you have availability to do that?
Evening is always better for me.
Evening would be better.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, Glenn?
Yeah, I'm just looking and today sunset is at 5:55 and between now and end of April, we have daylight savings time plus another 5 or 6 weeks. So I think that sunset is well after 7 o'clock, so that it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, that's it.
So is there a final
Thank you, Glenn.
decision? Is it 3 to 6 or 4 to 7, or is it to be determined depending on our conversations with the venue?
I don't think we should make it. I think you should talk to the venue, and then we shouldn't break something that, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Like,
Okay.
it does. What does everyone else think?
I think 4 to 7 is good unless something comes up to change that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The new coronavirus version that blots out the sun, perhaps.
Oh, goodness gracious.
That would be Ecliptotron. So like, watch yourself, right? Like, I mean, Omicron sounded like a transformer, so that's where I'm going with this, folks. That's where I'm going.
Well, there is a new variant that is starting to move around, but seeing as how such a large percentage of people are now vaccinated and quite a few boosted, and it's outside, unless something brand new comes up that turns out to be much worse somehow, I think we're fine.
Yeah.
Are there any other, does anyone else in the virtual room have any other ideas, considerations, questions, doubts?
Not to put him on the spot, but Joelle, are you here? Are you listening?
Yes, I am. I'm listening
Okay.
and I'm taking notes.
Okay, I just want, because I don't know that you are familiar with this event when it happened in real life, so I just want to give you just a quick backdrop that, we get like, about 60 organizations, agency participants, and then about 500 young people between the ages of 14 and 20 walk through the doors within a 3-hour period. So it's a really great event in terms of really feeling good about the future, and in terms of participation and the feedback that we get. So I just want to make sure that you've got sort of that perspective on it. And once we get the date, it would be wonderful to have it on the council members on her calendar.
Definitely, I will make sure that I happen. And especially that I have access to the YouTube, so I will watch it afterwards and then get a better sense of it.
Very cool.
Yeah, I see the link, the YouTube link.
Thanks.
And I see a quick chat from Anne. How would we flesh out the mental health support, and who else aside from our YLP members would be on that panel? I wanted to hear more about that. Carl, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so basically, it's, and what I was thinking when I had that idea earlier, it's and I apologize because I'm definitely not well versed in that space, but it was just something about I'm assuming there's some subset of the local organizations that basically, help teenagers cope with, depression, anxiety, and, they either help our adolescents develop strategies to deal with these or to recognize these or to understand, hey, like our organization and others exist that help teenagers understand that it's okay to feel these things and to deal with them. And so what I was thinking with this panel, and I like Nikki's idea of if, some of our youth conference if some of our youth leadership members felt comfortable being part of that conversation too, that'd be great. But I was thinking something along the lines of some of these representatives from these organizations and, maybe some teenagers who would feel comfortable about this, just talking about some of the challenges of going through the past 2 years. And there's no need to go deep into, personal details, but just talking out loud about the ups and downs that they've experienced through these times and how some of the strategies that they've used, maybe some of them worked or some of them didn't. And, I guess at the end of that panel, if there was time for a Q&A, then I would assume or hope that some of the teenagers in the audience would ask some of these panel members the same thing. So that's what I was thinking about, and in my head, but that's just me spitballing. And I see both of you, Sean, and you have comments, I guess, / ideas, questions.
Well, I was just going to say that there's a lot of groups that have participated in the past who offer a mental health and a component to their services. So I don't think we'd have to go far afield and I'm sure that they have tailored them to emerging needs. So like Safe Horizons and CAMBA, and then the city agencies, DOHMH and the Thrive program. Anya probably has 10 organizations that when they fill out their form, she knows that they, provide that sort of mental health and emotional support in their regular programming. So I think that's like I said, I think we should be able to identify them pretty easily.
Yeah, and any panel that is stacked with our Youth Leadership Council or other teenagers should definitely be led by somebody that has some expertise to drive their conversation in a meaningful way and a safe way.
Go ahead, Ann. Yep.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, I agree with that. I just wonder if it wouldn't be more helpful to make more of a presentation of what services are available, as opposed to a Q&A for teens may be very personal in a public setting. And I just wonder if they'd be more open or available to having ready resources available to them where they can then consult with their parents, their peers, and then take those next steps.
Yeah, I think it's a very both and sort of solution because as Joanne said, if the person leading the conversations, and we've had very delicate conversations that are handled well, like safe dating and like relationship abuse conversations and body image conversations and that sort of thing. And they're led by people who are accustomed to speaking in the larger group and then knowing how to take something like offline and follow up offline. So I think if it is in the hands of experts, we can handle anything sensitive. And then yes, the backup materials, those organizations, I think will know just because it's what they do to have the follow-up information and resources available. I think, we've always depended on the expertise of our participants and, they've never let us down.
Thank you, all three of you, for for the comments and insight on that. That's very helpful on multiple levels, right, and across multiple things. So thank you for that, definitely. And so I'm trying to think, were there any additional things? Not really. It looks like very high level, in terms of next steps. Anya, you have your follow-up conversation with LaFrac, and then you know, pending how that goes in the best universe, then there'll be a site visit date, and then, you know, the site visit will happen, and then we'll have a better idea of what we can figure out. And then, you know, Patricia is also in the office who can assist with you know, the website registration and the update of things. And then Sean, as you had mentioned, the potential idea is that in our community board meeting next Monday, that can be a call for volunteers for some of those things that we had mentioned.
Sell it, y'all. Sell it.
You know, hey, soft sell. This is it. Know your audience, right? Okay, gotcha. Nikki, am I forgetting any other I think next steps?
That was everything that I had. Just want to make sure everybody who's here at this meeting knows if you wanted to follow up with Carl or I via email, if you had some sort of follow-up idea, like very open to receiving those. And I'm sure Sean and I'm not sure it's a great idea to put our email into like the chat. I'm not sure what happens with the chat after these meetings. Sean and Anya, can we put our emails in the chat of the conversation, or is the protocol to have people follow up with the office?
If you're comfortable, you can. And just so everyone knows, the chat is not, it does not go to the live stream. The chat's visible to the people we have here. We do have one person, 917, who isn't identified. So I'm just putting that out there. If you'd like to share your name, you're welcome to.
And so I shared my email in the chat if anybody has any follow-up ideas or thoughts.
Let's just, if something comes to us, we'll make sure you're in the loop. And if it goes directly to you, just make sure we're in the loop so that we are in the same loop. That's how that would work.
It's good to be in loops together.
Just don't get dizzy. Just don't get dizzy.
Yeah. So unless anyone has any other concerns or thoughts, to Sean, Anya, Joanne, any final words?
And for me, you guys are great.
Well, it'll be really exciting. You know, what did you call it? Eclipticon, Carl? As long as like Eclipticon.
Oh, I said it was Eclipse. Eclipsotron. That was it.
As long as Eclipsotron doesn't happen, then I think we have a lot to feel optimistic and excited about.
Oh yeah, I'm 100% rooting for the Autobots here. I don't want any Decepticons on this thing. 100% Autobots. That's where I'm going.
But thank you everybody for your good ideas and for attending and for engagement with this year's event. And thank you so much, Joel, to you for joining us, and to Rita Joseph for giving you the time to do so. And so Sean, Anya, I've never closed a committee meeting. Carl, what do we do now? Do we like go like and cut? Or
You count, everyone counts to 3 and then signs off.
Take a bow.
Nikki, I like what you did and cut. I want to use that. I like that.
Thanks, everybody. You know where to find us.
Okay, thank you all. Have a great night.
Yep,
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Have a good night, folks.
Good meeting.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
See you.